Today, I'll tell you a story so powerful it silenced the deadliest gunman in 3 territories, set in the harsh heart of the Old West, where every creak of a floorboard could be your last warning. This was a land ruled by speed, pride, and fear, until one man decided enough was enough. It all began with a simple insult inside a quiet saloon, something most folks would have ignored. But that moment lit a fuse that no one could stop. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Some truths don't arrive gently. Some are carved into memory with blood and broken glass on a saloon floor. I learned mine on a bitter November afternoon in 1878. I was behind the bar at the Silver Dollar in Redemption Creek, Montana territory, when I witnessed something that still pulls me awake long after midnight. There's being quick with a gun, and then there's being a man worthy of the steel on his hip. That day taught me those two things rarely ride together. His name was Hexley, and folks said he was the fastest draw across 3 territories. Only 23, already carrying 7 notches on his coat. But speed alone never made a man decent, and carried cruelty the way the Yellowstone carries spring floodwater, wide, cold, and destructive. For 3 weeks straight, I watched him grind our town down, picking on men who couldn't answer him, humiliating people simply because no one dared stop him. That Thursday, though, he crossed a line that would cost him everything. He set his sights on Tobin Wraith, a 72-year-old shopkeeper who'd never drawn a gun in anger in his life. Tobin's hands trembled with age, his eyesight had faded, and saw it all, and didn't care. He shoved the old man around right there in my saloon, laughing as Tobin tried to retreat with what dignity he had left. That's when the door opened. The afternoon sun poured in behind the newcomer, and all I could make out at first was a dark outline and the unmistakable shape of a sharp's rifle. When the man stepped inside, the room shifted. What came next hit hard. I'm telling it exactly as it unfolded, because I was less than 10 feet away, polishing glasses behind that bar like I had for 15 years. The Silver Dollar was my life. I knew every warped board, every scar in the floor, every soul who passed through that door, but I'd never seen this man before. Something about him froze my hands mid-motion. He looked 45, maybe 50, weathered like saddle leather, iron-gray streaks cutting through dark hair. His coat carried trail dust no matter how clean it looked, and he held that sharp's rifle like it was grown into his bones. What stopped me cold were his eyes. Ice blue, sharp as mountain winter, locked straight on Hexley without sparing a glance for anyone else. Still had Tobin Wraith by the collar, shaking him like a rag doll. Tobin's spectacles lay smashed on the floor, his face red as he fought not to break in front of us all. There were maybe 8 people in the saloon that afternoon. No one moved. No one intervened. We'd all seen what could do with that Colt. Seen him punch 3 holes through a Silver Dollar at 20 paces. Seen him outdraw Cale Morvan so fast, Cale never cleared leather before taking a round in the shoulder. That had been 2 weeks earlier. Cale was still recovering over at Doc Vale's place, lucky to be breathing. The stranger let the door close behind him, the soft thud sounding loud in the thick silence. His boots crossed the floor with deliberate weight, 2 steps in, measured and controlled. The kind of movement that comes from living long enough to know violence can erupt without warning. He held the sharps loosely, barrel angled toward the floor, but there was nothing casual about him. "Let him go," the stranger said. He didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten. But his words rolled across the room like distant thunder, clear as church bells to every ear present. Turned slowly, still gripping Tobin with his left hand. His right hovered near his gun, and that familiar grin crept across his face, the one that meant he'd found new amusement, someone else to break. The stranger didn't move. His rifle stayed low but ready, his pale eyes never leaving Cor's face. "This ain't your business, old man," Cor said, shoving Tobin backward into a chair. The old shopkeeper hit hard, air leaving his lungs in a sharp gasp. His glasses skidded under a nearby table. "You'd best turn around and walk back out that door," Cor went on, "before you leave with a hole in you." His hand hovered near the Colt, fingers flexing, already tasting the draw, already imagining another notch. I'd seen that look before. It meant blood was coming. The stranger stepped forward, 3 slow steps, boots sounding heavy on the boards. The other patrons pressed back toward the walls, clearing space. Nielle Vire, who'd been sewing at the corner table, flattened herself against the wall, eyes wide. Bram Hollis slipped behind a support beam. Everyone in Redemption Creek knew how this usually ended. We'd watched Cor Hexley too many times, with someone wounded or dead at his feet, that grin still on his face, and the rest of us too scared to intervene. Cor finally released Tobin and squared himself toward this new problem. His hand still floated near the Colt, anticipation bright in his eyes. He loved this moment, the pause before violence, the instant fear cracked across another man's face. But the stranger didn't blink. He lived for that pause, the breath before violence broke loose. He fed on it. The way fear crept into another man's eyes gave him satisfaction. But the stranger showed none of it. His gaze stayed flat and steady, like a man who had stood in this place too many times to wonder how it would end. "I am making it my concern," the stranger said. His voice remained even, calm as still water. He stopped roughly 15 feet from Cor Hexley, shifting his stance just enough for his boots to settle solid on the boards. The Sharp's rifle stayed angled toward the floor, but his thumb slid back to rest on the hammer. "That man you're roughing up fought at Shiloh," he went on. "He buried 2 sons after Antietam. He's earned more respect than you'll ever understand, boy." That's when it struck me. The stranger knew Tobin Wraith, or at least knew his story. Tobin was still slumped in the chair where Cor had thrown him, groping across the floor for his spectacles. Tears burned in his eyes, thick with shame. His hands shook harder than usual. Age, fear, anger, I couldn't tell. Likely all 3. Cor noticed those tears too, and they set him laughing. That sharp, cruel laugh that had come to define Redemption Creek. It was the sound of a man who took pleasure in pain, a man who treated suffering like entertainment. "A soldier, huh?" Cor sneered. His hand drifted near his gun, fingers flexing. "Well, soldier boys don't look like much now." He reached for Tobin's abandoned coffee cup, lifted it just long enough to watch the old man's trembling hands stretch toward it, then jerked it away. Coffee splashed across the floor, spreading dark between the boards. Several men in the saloon had worn uniforms once. I saw their jaws tighten at the insult. And I saw something shift in the stranger's face right then. Not rage exactly, though anger lived there. It was resolve. A line crossed, never to be redrawn. He adjusted the Sharp's rifle slightly, no more than an inch. Yet the room changed with it. The air grew tight, charged, like the seconds before lightning splits the sky. Even Cor felt it. His grin faltered for a heartbeat. Doubt flickered across his face before arrogance forced it down again. "Son?" the stranger said quietly. So quiet it carried weight. "You've got about 3 seconds to apologize to that man and walk out alive." There was no threat in his tone, no bragging, just certainty, spoken by someone who already knew the outcome. I'd tended bar across frontier towns for 20 years. I'd heard plenty of men talk tough. Most of it was empty noise. This wasn't. This was a promise. Cor laughed again, though the sound came thin. You threatening me with that buffalo gun? He jerked his chin at the Sharp's rifle. You know how slow those single-shot rifles are? By the time you crack that breech and reload, I'll have 3 holes in you. Hell, I'll put 3 rounds in you before you even fire once. His hand hovered close to the Colt, his breathing tightening as he worked himself toward the draw, the way he always did when violence called. The stranger didn't blink. His pale eyes locked on Cor's, and I swear the room turned colder. Fast enough, he said. Then, in that same measured voice, he added, Name's Ashrel Dorn. He glanced briefly toward Tobin Wraith, who had finally found his spectacles and was sliding them back on with shaking hands. I rode with Tobin's regiment during the war, Dorn continued, eyes returning to Cor. Came to Redemption Creek to pay respects to an old friend. He paused. Didn't expect to find him being humiliated by a kid who thinks speed makes a man. I saw heads nod around the room. Cor had ruled this town with fear for 3 weeks, and every one of us had hoped someone would stop him. But hope and action aren't the same thing. Most of us wanted to keep breathing. Cor's face flushed red at being called a kid. Pride burned hot in him. His reputation, his skill with that Colt, all of it. That single word cut deeper than any insult to his shooting ever could. His jaw tightened. His hand twitched closer to the grip. You want to test that idea, old man? Cor snapped. You want to see just how fast I really am? His voice rose. I'll show everyone in this room. You'll be dead before you know I've drawn. Ashrel Dorn didn't answer at once. He just stood there. The silence grew heavy. I could feel every soul in the saloon holding their breath. Somewhere behind me, Yella Vire whispered a prayer. Outside, a horse nickered. Someone shouted about a lumber wagon. Inside the silver dollar, time froze. The clock ticked. Floorboards creaked as Bram Hollis shifted behind the support beam. Finally, Dorn spoke. I'm giving you one chance, he said evenly. Help that man to his feet. His voice never rose. Apologize. Apologize the right way and ride out of this town, Ashrel Dorn said. Do that and you keep breathing. Don't. And I'll give you a lesson in respect that'll last as long as you've got left. Which won't be long. His thumb stayed settled on the Sharp's rifle's hammer, and I caught the slight movement of his fingers slipping inside the trigger guard. Cor Hexley didn't wait for another word. His hand dropped to his Colt in a blur. I'm telling you plain, it was the fastest draw I'd ever witnessed, and I'd seen more than my share. That revolver cleared leather like a striking snake, smooth and lethal. The hammer was already coming back as the barrel lifted toward Ashrel Dorn's chest. For a split second, I was sure Cor Hexley was about to carve another notch into his legend, and that Dorn would be the 8th fool to test him. Time stretched thin. I saw Cor's finger tightening, saw the barrel level out, saw victory flare in his eyes. Then the shot came. Not from the Colt, from the Sharps. I never even saw Dorn's hands move. One moment the rifle was angled at the floor. The next, thunder and smoke ripped through the room, and the silver dollar shuddered under the force of that .50 caliber blast. Cor Hexley staggered backward, eyes blown wide, his Colt torn from his grip and spinning through the air before crashing against the far wall near the door. I stood frozen behind the bar, mouth open, trying to understand what I'd just seen. Cor stood in the middle of the saloon, staring at his empty right hand like it had betrayed him. His palm was ripped open and bleeding where the grip had been blown away, shock written across his face. The stench of gunpowder flooded the room, sharp, bitter, and smoke drifted like early morning fog. I realized the glass I'd been holding had slipped from my hand at the shot, shattering behind the bar. No one even looked at it. Every eye in the room locked onto Ashrel Dorn and Cor Hexley. Dorn had already broken open the sharps, sliding a fresh cartridge home with calm, practiced ease. His movements were unhurried, exact, like a man who'd done this a lifetime. The reload took maybe 3 seconds, 4 at most. When he looked up, his face showed nothing at all. Those pale eyes held only resolve. "Fast enough," Dorn said, his voice solid as stone. He snapped the breech shut. The metallic click echoed louder than it should have in the stunned silence. Cor kept staring at his ruined hand, blood dripping onto the boards. His face had gone white as fresh snow. I'd never seen fear touch him before. Never thought it could. Cor Hexley had laughed while men bled, smiled while he broke people. He'd moved through town like nothing on earth could touch him. But now he was terrified. I saw it in his eyes, in the stiffness of his body, in the tremor creeping up his legs. Tobin Wraith pushed himself up from the chair where he'd been thrown and stood straightening his vest with what dignity he could find. His hand still shook, but his gaze was steady behind those spectacles. "Ashrel," he said, voice cracking. "Is that really you? After all these years, I thought you were dead. They told me you fell at Stone's River." "It's me, Tobin," Dorn replied, never taking his eyes off Cor. The rifle stayed ready, angled low, but capable of rising in a heartbeat. "Sorry I'm late for supper. Got delayed by this business." He tipped the barrel slightly toward Cor, who cradled his injured hand against his chest. Blood pattered onto the floor, darkening the wood. "There's a doctor 2 doors down," I said at last, finding my voice. It came out thinner than I liked. "That hand needs attention. You'd best see Doc Vale before infection sets in." Cor didn't move. He stared at Dorn like he was seeing a ghost, or watching the rules of the world collapse. "How?" he whispered. "How did you do that? I'm the fastest draw in 3 territories. I've beaten everyone." "How?" he asked again. 40 years behind a sharp's rifle," Dorn said quietly. His tone was almost casual now. "Buffalo from Kansas to Montana, war, army scouting." He paused. "After a while, the rifle stops being a tool. It becomes part of you. You don't think. You act." His eyes stayed fixed on Cor. "And you, son, you were thinking. I saw it. You had to choose to draw. You had to decide." "Me?" Dorn went on. "I made my decision before I walked through that door. I was ready long before you knew we were fighting." Understanding crossed Cor's face, followed by something hollow and broken. Everything he was had been built on one truth: that he was the fastest gun alive. That was his name, his purpose, his identity. And in a single heartbeat, Ashrel Dorn shattered it. In less than 3 seconds, Ashrel Dorn had smashed that identity beyond repair. It wasn't only that he'd been faster, though he had. It was the way he'd done it. Clean, effortless. As if Cor Hexley were nothing more than a child fumbling with playthings. Cor's eyes darted to his Colt lying against the far wall, then back to Dorn. I could see the calculations running behind his stare, measuring distance, time, wondering if he could reach the gun and fire before that sharp spoke again. But whatever he found in Dorn's face ended the thought right there. That rifle was loaded and ready. And Cor had just learned the hard truth. Speed alone meant nothing. There were things that mattered more than a quick draw, like knowing when a fight was over, like knowing when to walk away. Pick up your gun and leave, Dorn said, his voice dropping back into that low, dangerous calm. And if I ever hear you're bothering Tobin Wraith again, or anyone else who can't defend themselves, I'll come back. Next time I won't shoot the gun. I'll aim center mass. And you know what a .50 caliber Sharps round does to a man's chest. You'll be dead before you hit the ground. Kor moved slowly, keeping his left hand where Dorn could see it. His right hand hung useless, blood dripping steady onto the floor. He crossed to where the Colt had fallen. Every step was careful, measured, like he was walking on frozen water, afraid it might give way. He bent down without breaking eye contact and picked up the revolver with his left hand. The grip was shattered where the bullet had struck, the metal twisted and bent beyond easy repair. The gun was likely finished, maybe forever. Kor stared at it, then looked back at Dorn. Whatever lived in his expression before was gone. The swagger, the arrogance, all of it stripped away, replaced by something harder to name. Fear, perhaps, respect, maybe, or simply the cold understanding that he wasn't the fastest thing alive after all. That real skill, real experience, didn't care about reputation. He turned toward the door without another word. His boots scraped across the boards. The ruined Colt hung in his left hand. Blood still marked his trail. He shoved the door open with his shoulder and stepped out into the afternoon light. Moments later, we heard his horse, hooves striking hard as he rode fast down the main street, the sound fading as he fled town. I knew then we wouldn't see Kor Hexley in Redemption Creek again. I was right. Later, word reached us that he'd drifted south into Wyoming territory, still chasing someone to prove himself against, still hunting the validation he believed only speed could give him. The tension snapped all at once. Niella Vire let out a breath she'd been holding forever. And Bram Hollis started laughing, a thin, nervous sound that spilled out once the danger had passed. The kind of laughter that comes when you realize you're still standing. I noticed my own hands shaking as I bent to gather the shards of the glass I'd dropped. Tobin Wraith sat back down in the same chair where it had all begun, tears running down his lined face. They weren't tears of shame anymore. They were relief, gratitude, the kind that comes from seeing a man you thought long dead standing right in front of you. Ashrel Dorn finally lowered the sharps, letting the barrel rest toward the floor. He stepped over and placed a hand on Tobin's shoulder. "You all right?" he asked gently. The hardness was gone, like it had never been there. Tobin nodded, unable to speak at first. He removed his spectacles and wiped his eyes with a handkerchief pulled from his vest. "I thought I was finished," he said quietly. "Thought that boy was going to kill me just to add another notch. I've seen men like him before," Tobin went on. "In the war. Men who enjoyed killing, who took pleasure in other people's pain. I saw it in his eyes." "Not while I'm breathing," Dorn said firmly. He pulled out a chair and sat beside his old friend, setting the Sharps rifle carefully against the table where it could be reached if needed. I brought a bottle of whiskey and 3 glasses without being asked. My hands had steadied, though my heart still raced. I poured heavy for both of them, and one for myself. Lord knows I needed it. We all did. The other patrons had started talking again, voices rising as the story began spreading even before it ended. By nightfall, all of Redemption Creek would know. "That was something," Bram Hollis said, joining us with his own glass. He was near 60, bald as an egg, once a blacksmith before his back gave out, now content to sit in saloons and remember the past. "I've seen plenty in my life," he continued, "but nothing like that. Hexley was fast as lightning, Fastest draw I ever laid eyes on. He looked at Dorn. But you, sir, you were thunder, like the hand of God. Dorn took a slow sip of whiskey and nodded. Wasn't about speed, he said thoughtfully. It was about being ready. Hexley had to think. He had to choose. I didn't. I made my decision the moment I saw him laying hands on Tobin. Everything after that was just carrying it out. He paused, slowly rolling the whiskey in his glass. War teaches you one hard truth, Ashrel Dorn said. Hesitation will get you killed. But charging him blind will do the same. He lifted his eyes. The skill is knowing the difference between patience and hesitation. I was patient. I waited for the right second. Then I acted without doubt. Tobin Wraith had gathered himself enough to speak clearly now. You saved my life, he said quietly. That boy would have done it too. I saw it in his eyes. He wanted to kill me just to prove he could. Tobin went on, to show this whole town nobody was safe. He'd been getting worse every day, meaner, more reckless. It was only a matter of time before he killed someone who couldn't fight back. I'm just grateful it wasn't my turn. I couldn't help myself. Where did you learn to shoot like that? I asked. Call it professional curiosity or pure disbelief. I'd poured drinks in frontier towns for 20 years. I'd watched gunfights, standoffs, men betting their lives on speed and nerve. But nothing I'd ever seen compared to what had just unfolded in my saloon. The control, the precision, the absolute certainty in Dorn's movements. It was like watching an artist at work, if violence were the canvas and gunpowder the paint. Dorn glanced at the sharps leaning against the table, his hand resting near it like it was an old companion. Started hunting buffalo in '68, he said. You learn fast or you starve. Those animals are big targets, sure. But wound one without killing it, and you've got 1,500 pounds of rage charging you. So you learn to make the first shot count. You learn to stay calm when everything's on the line. You learn to shoot straight when your life depends on it. Then his expression dimmed. After that, the war came. His gaze drifted somewhere far away, back through smoke and memory. They put me in a sharpshooter unit. That was different. Buffalo don't shoot back. Confederate soldiers did. But the rules stayed the same. Steady hands, clear head, one shot. I spent 3 years firing at men who were trying to kill me and the people beside me. You learn a lot in 3 years of war. Most of it you wish you didn't. He took another drink, and I caught the faint tremor in his hand. But some of it keeps you alive. After the war, I drifted west. Dorn continued, his voice warming as he moved past darker memories. Worked as an army scout for a spell. Guarded wagon trains, tracked hostile bands. Then went back to buffalo hunting while there were still herds left. Made decent money. Saw land most folks never lay eyes on. Lived free under open sky. Then he looked straight at me, those pale eyes sharp again. But here's the real secret. Knowing when not to shoot. I've drawn this rifle on men maybe 50 times in my life. I fired it maybe 10. The rest backed down when they saw I was ready to finish it. That's not fear, that's judgment. Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is let another walk away. That settled heavy in the room. I nodded without thinking. It made sense. Violence ought to be the last answer, not the first. Men like Core Hexley had it backward. They hunted fights, chased proof, needed to dominate. Men like Ashrel Dorn avoided trouble when they could, and ended it cleanly when they couldn't. Over the next hour, as the whiskey bottle lightened and the sun slid toward the western mountains, throwing long shadows across the saloon floor. Dorn shared more of his story. He'd been born in Ohio back in '43. Headed west after the war, searching for something he couldn't quite name. Peace, maybe. Purpose, or simply distance from everything he'd seen. "I met Tobin at Shiloh," he said, nodding toward his old friend. "We were green as spring grass, scared stiff. No one's ready for their first battle. The noise, the smoke, the screaming, the confusion." He smiled faintly. "Tobin pulled me out of a creek bed when I caught a mini ball in the leg. I was bleeding bad, couldn't walk. He threw me over his shoulder and carried me half a mile to the field hospital. I wouldn't be here if not for him." Tobin waved it off with shaking hands. "You'd have done the same." "And did," Dorn said. "At Stones River. Remember? That shell knocked you cold. I dragged you into a ditch and stayed with you for 2 hours while the fight kept raging. We watched each other. That's how we lived." The two old soldiers met each other's eyes, and I watched years of shared hell pass between them without a single word. They'd survived the kind of fire that forges men into brothers, or breaks them apart forever. There's no middle ground when you've been through that together. When you've stared death in the face together. When you've pulled one another back from the edge and watched friends fall beside you. There's a bond that forms beyond words. Those two were brothers in every way that mattered. Tied by blood spilled long ago and shared scars that never fade. I poured another round for all of us and said, "Core Hexley has been terrorizing this town for weeks now. No one stood up to him because he's fast and cruel. He killed a man in Bannock last month over a card game. The fellow called him a cheat, probably right. And Core shot him before he could even rise from the table. Drew and fired without a second thought. Then he rode out before the marshal could catch him, came straight here to Redemption Creek, and started all over again." I saw Ashrel Dorn's jaw tighten, anger flashing cold and sharp in those pale eyes. "Men like that have to be stopped before they kill someone who can't fight back," he said quietly. "I've seen too many Core Hexleys in my life. Different names, different faces, but the same rot inside. They get quick with a gun and start believing it makes them untouchable. Like speed gives them the right to hurt anyone they please. But speed without honor is just murder dressed up pretty. It's killing without justice, without purpose, taking a gift and twisting it into something ugly. "You could have killed him," Bram Hollis said, pulling up a chair. "Nobody here would have blamed you. Hell, the marshal might have pinned a medal on you. That boy's been begging for a grave since he rode into town. You'd have saved us all a lot of trouble and probably a few lives down the road." "I could have," Dorn agreed, nodding once. "But that wouldn't have been justice. That would have been execution. I gave him a chance to walk away alive. He took it. Maybe he learned something today. Maybe next time he thinks twice before laying hands on an old man or humiliating someone weaker than himself. Maybe feeling that helpless, having his gun shot out of his hand, taught him what fear really is. Maybe it taught him something his father never did." He paused, took another sip of whiskey. Or maybe he'll come back hunting revenge. Maybe his pride won't let it rest. "Either way," he said calmly, "I'll be ready. I always am." Tobin Wraith reached out and clasped his old friend's arm with both hands. "You staying in town a while?" he asked, voice thick. "Please say yes. I thought I'd lost you, to the war or the wilderness. Seeing you here, alive, it's like getting a piece of my soul back." "I was planning on it," Dorn said. For the first time since he'd stepped through the saloon door, Real warmth touched his face. Got nowhere pressing to be. No family waiting. No business calling me elsewhere. Figured I might look for work. Stay close to an old friend for a bit. Been riding alone too long. A man gets tired of his own company after a while, he went on. Tired of sleeping under the stars, eating cold beans, never having a real conversation with someone who matters. I could use help at the shop, Tobin said quickly, like he feared the offer might slip away. Can't pay much. I won't pretend otherwise. But there's a room upstairs. Small but clean, dry, warm, room and board, plus whatever I can manage each month. And more than that, you'd be helping an old man who's not as strong as he used to be, and who could use the company. What do you say? Dorn smiled. The first honest smile I'd seen from him. It changed him, made him look younger, softened the hard lines carved by war and years on the trail. Sounds like heaven, he said warmly. I accept, with gratitude and friendship. Been too long since I had a real home. Too long. The story spread through Redemption Creek like fire through dry grass. By sundown, everyone knew what had happened at the Silver Dollar. How Ashrel Dorn had faced down Cor Hexley and blasted the gun clean out of his hand with a single shot from a Sharps rifle. By morning, the tale had grown, as tales always do. Some swore Dorn had done it blindfolded. Others claimed Cor fired 3 shots before Dorn even moved. One fellow said the bullet passed through the gun and grazed Cor's chest without killing him. People love their legends. But I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. And I'm telling you plain, no embellishment needed. The truth never needed dressing up. It was powerful enough standing on its own. I'm an old man now myself, past 70. And I still tend bar at the Silver Dollar. My bones creak louder than the floorboards these days. And my hands shake almost as bad as Tobin Wraith's once did. But I tell this story to anyone willing to listen because it taught me something worth passing on. Something folks today maybe need to hear more than ever. Speed isn't everything. Cor Hexley was fast. Faster than any man I'd ever seen in my life. But he was hollow inside. Nothing but technique and cruelty. All speed, no soul. Ashrel Dorn was slower with a gun, but faster where it counted. In his mind, in his heart, in his understanding of what truly makes a man dangerous. The lesson I learned that cold November afternoon in 1878 was simple. Real strength isn't about being the quickest, the strongest, or the meanest man in the room. It's about knowing who you are. It's about standing for what's right when it would be easier not to. About protecting those who can't protect themselves. Ashrel Dorn could have walked past that saloon door. He could have let Cor Hexley humiliate Tobin Wraith and kept riding. Nobody would have blamed him. It wasn't his fight, but he didn't walk past. He stepped in because it was right. Not because it was safe, not because it was easy, not because there was anything to gain. He stepped in because that's what real men do when they see injustice. Cor Hexley never came back to Redemption Creek. Later, we heard he drifted down into Wyoming territory, still hunting someone to prove himself against, still chasing validation through violence. 6 months after that day in my saloon, he got himself killed in a gunfight in Cheyenne. Seems he learned nothing. Picked the wrong man that time. And there was no one to shoot the gun from his hand. That man aimed to kill. And Cor Hexley ended up in a shallow grave outside Cheyenne with nothing but 7 notches on his Colt to show for 23 wasted years. Ashrel Dorn stayed. He helped run the store, became part of the town. Quiet man. Kept to himself mostly, but folks respected him. Word spread about his skill with that Sharps rifle, and no one caused trouble in Redemption Creek while he was around. Just knowing he existed, knowing he would act if needed, was enough to keep the peace. That's real power. Not the power to destroy, but the power to protect through reputation and readiness. Tobin Wraith lived another 8 years, and he spent every one of them with his old friend by his side. When Tobin passed in his sleep in the spring of '86, Ashrel was there through the final night, holding his hand, talking about Shiloh, Stones River, and everything that came after. I was there when Tobin took his last breath. I saw the tears on Ashrel's weathered face. That's real friendship. That's real love between brothers. Ashrel Dorn stayed in Redemption Creek until '93, running the store and keeping the peace simply by being present. As far as I know, he never fired that Sharps rifle in anger again. Never needed to. That one shot was enough. When he finally passed, the whole town turned out. We buried him beside Tobin Wraith, laid that Sharps rifle across his grave. It stayed there until the wood rotted and the steel rusted away. A quiet monument to a man who used his gift for good instead of evil. So next time you see someone being pushed around, someone who can't fight back, ask yourself what you'll do. Will you walk past and say it's not your concern? Will you be Core Hexley, using strength to crush the weak? Or will you be Ashrel Dorn, stepping in when stepping in is hard and dangerous? I know which one I'd choose. I saw both men with my own eyes. Only one of them is worth remembering with respect. Only one built something instead of tearing it down. Only one made the world better by being in it. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for riding with us today. Aviso legal. Disclaimer: our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully, only to support production, while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.